Hi, Joe. Is that working? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can
Going
hear
through?
you, Andrew.
Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, so I just started the recording, but obviously we can edit it later if we want to trim some stuff out. But just for this meeting and also for the video, welcome to what is now our fifth annual meeting to talk about these mapping tools. We started, Matt pointed out, in 2020, and we've been doing it every year since. So welcome everyone. Here's my rough timetable, but please let me know if you want to insert anything. First, maybe we do a round of introductions, just so those of us that haven't met we can meet each other. Then I'll give a quick rundown of what's happened in terms of the technical use of the tools. A little brief intro to the libmapper project. And then we have scheduled a few project reports by Kyle and by Matt, original authors of the libmapper tools and kind of the main maintainer. And yeah, so let's pass the mic. If any of you don't wish to unmute, that's fine as well, but I'll call your name and you just be silent and we'll move on. Maxwell, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Here, let me also turn my camera on. There we. Oh, is it asking me to? Jeez, yeah,
Great.
there we go.
I can see you.
Hi, I'm Maxwell. I'm a member of IDMIL. I'm a year 3 master's student over there, and I'm currently working on haptics on the torque tuner.
Fantastic. Kyle, you're next on my screen.
Hi, I'm Kyle. I'm an undergraduate at Dalhousie University. Joe brought me on to help out with libmapper over the summer. Happy to be here.
Danilo?
Hi, I'm Danilo. I'm a first year's master's student at IDMIL. So yeah, looking forward to learning about libmapper.
Nice. Sorry for mispronouncing your name.
No worries.
Casey.
Hello, I'm Casey Pocius. My start camera button doesn't seem to be working, but I'm an alumni from IDMIL, and I've been intermediate artist working quite a lot with libmapper and some of the other tools, though mostly these days focusing with the OCS stuff.
Nice. Andrew.
Hey, everyone. Yes, hi. Great. Thanks for holding this. I didn't know you did an annual thing. That's fantastic. I love it. What a great tool. Of course, it's much more than a tool, as you know, right? That whole thing of mapping is so important. So I praise you for carrying on and continuing to develop this project. My name's Andrew Stewart. I currently live and teach in Lethbridge, Alberta, but of course, yeah, I'm very familiar with what's happening. Well, I guess I'm not totally up to date. That's why I'm here. But I was familiar with what was happening at IDMIL, having done my doctoral degree there. And of course, I know Casey through, I don't know, Concordia. Maybe we met at Concordia and stuff years back, and among other things. So
yeah, Andrew was there when libmapper started, and was one of the first people writing pieces using libmapper.
Awesome tool. I remember when it was. I remember all the different names and when different objects were called different things, and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, thanks, thanks everyone.
Nice, Gael.
Hi, I'm Gaël. I'm a master student at Université de Montréal in composition and sound creation, and I write music for DMIs, especially the T-Stick.
Fantastic. And Matt.
Hey, I'm Matt Peachy. I'm a PhD student here at Dalhousie working with Joe. libmapper has been a big part of my work since I've been here, and so happy to keep contributing to the project and being here with you guys today.
Fantastic. All right, thanks everybody. Promise we'll get to the more exciting parts, but first I'll just do a brief overview of our progress since the last workshop. So since basically beginning of September last year. Introductions are done. Oh yeah, so I thought this was kind of funny. I started making a slide with libmapper features over the years, and then it just kind of got a little out of control. But this helps give a little bit of context for the scope of the libmapper project. Starting in 2007, the library, that's when it started. And then these are some of the kind of major features that were added over the years, support for vectors and indexing history, instances, TCP, convergent maps, long delay lines in the map looper project, etc. Our language bindings, because the part of the philosophy of libmapper is to support users continuing to use the tools that they already know and love, rather than having to force everyone onto a single platform in order to collaborate. So the idea is, if you use SuperCollider, you should keep using SuperCollider, but maybe we can make it easy for you to collaborate with people doing, some idiosyncratic, interesting DMI hardware or a completely different language. So you'll see a few languages show up more than once here because the bindings have been rewritten and improved. And we see a nice stack in 2024 due to the hard work of Kyle and Matt over the summer. Also integrations I'm not really calling these bindings, but integrations with applications, like Godot or Ableton Live, Touch Designer, and Unity has been a project over the summer, which you'll hear about. This one's looking a little more sparse. I actually should put in I should have put in a dot for Jonty's work, where he was doing version controlled session management that unfortunately didn't make it into kind of production quality implementation, but we did work out kind of conceptually how it would work. And then this ended up being way more impressive than I thought. So these are publications that involved libmapper in some major way. So it's not not just that they cited libmapper, but that it was kind of integral to the work. I don't know what they are. Teal dots are theses, masters or doctoral theses, and then the gray ones are conference or journal publications. And if you see a number, that's actually the number of theses or conference publications. So in 2020 there were 3 NIME papers that involved libmapper in a deep way. Anyway, I think this shows a lot of hard work by a lot of people over, the last, we're looking at many years, 17 years. Anyway, so congrats to us. So a little bit of news in terms of publications. Since our last workshop, Matt published a paper at the Internet of Sounds Symposium called Faust Mapper, integrating Faust and libmapper, and then actually has 2 upcoming papers, both of which will be reported, like the work will be reported on later on in this meeting, so I won't go into any detail. In terms of library updates over the last year, we're looking at 276 commits, 7 different point releases. These are like little releases, but we're trying to get better at building releases to support easy integration of libmapper. Lots of bug fixes. Also lots of refactoring, which I think is important, because I think hopefully this will support an easier path to fixing things and having more integrations and stuff in the future. A few new features and new bindings, which you'll hear about later. We added over the summer a new part of the API for those that are using kind of low-level languages with libmapper. So now we have these new functions. I give you the C functions, but the bindings have similar functionality, where you can get and reset the status of an object. So you can find out whether it's been modified without using callbacks, and also do the same thing for instances, which ends up being pretty useful for the Unity bindings, for example. A bunch of optimizations. Finally optimized polling of devices that share a graph. So if you're mapping locally, then it's much more efficient. Took out a bunch of extra messages that somehow were being sent when they shouldn't be. 4.4, which was the version last September at the time of the workshop. We actually, it takes less than half the time to send to complete this test. Some miscellaneous stuff just upgraded to most recent version of liblo. switched to using a new feature, which helped it a lot. With a new polling argument, if you call poll with a block milliseconds less than 0, then it will actually just take the amount of time that it needs to process all the current messages. Network interface selection under Windows wasn't actually working properly at this point last year, and it's now working, and added a bunch of tests, a bunch of fixes in the expression engine, which I don't probably need to get into much detail. There's just a few regressions, a few missing features. We added a medium function. Also for convergent maps, now you can call a function called newest when you're indexing the signal. So you can actually just use the most recent value if you have, say, several signals converging into a map. And there's a shorthand for that using $2. The $sign is the signal index markup. And then not currently in main branch, but in our merge queue are some improvements to instancing logic, which Kyle and I have been working on testing and implementing over the last week and a half. Moving admin messaging in the mesh to TCP, which hopefully will help with some drop packets, which were experienced at the SAT. Hopefully some improvements to multi-threaded behavior. Kyle's got a nice example of consistent crashing that we're trying to fix. Some optimizations of instance transport, which should just speed things up for large numbers of instances. And the quaternion expressions proposal that we had last year still is not merged because there was some discussion about how to handle certain aspects of it. I added a new piece of documentation to the repository called Understanding Instance Signals and Maps. I got a typo there because it's kind of a complex topic. We also added doc strings to the Python bindings, so they're now properly documented, and did rearrange the expression syntax documentation to make it clearer, more readable. Webmapper now allows you to select the network on Windows and uses human-friendly network names, network interface names, fixes for some bugs. There's now a color property that you can, Webmapper will try to read if a device has a property called color.rgb or color.hue, then it will use that for the color in Webmapper instead of the hash of the device name. So if you want to customize your device color in Webmapper, you can now go nuts. Yeah, we restrict the value tweaking user interface to only input signals since it didn't actually affect output signals anyway, so it's kind of was misleading. Improvements to the signal monitor that Brady added to Webmapper, and a bunch of bug fixes. Yeah, mapper session time, I think only one commit since last, one feature commit anyway since last year, which is just supporting multiple session tags per map. So you could have multiple copies of mapper session running, or a map could belong to multiple sessions. In terms of distribution, I think Kyle may talk about this a little bit, but basically we are still on PyPy. This is slightly out of date, 2.4.9, but I'm hoping to probably release 2.4.11. And then I'll be, because it has more bug fixes in it for the instancing stuff, and I'll push those out. Realized from communicating with Andrew actually that Mac's package manager still doesn't list the libmapper objects, even though we submitted it more than a year ago. So I need to talk to them, but since it's been more than a year, I don't really want them to publish a 1.5-year old version of the objects. We'll give them something more recent. We're live on Homebrew, now also on NuGet and crates.io, which I think Kyle will be the one to talk about. So at this point, am I passing off to you, Kyle, or to Matt? Kyle first? Okay. All right.
Sounds good. Let me just get this going. Here we go. Should be going. Okay. So I'm here to just talk about some of the improvements we've made to integrations and bindings. So this year we've improved the C# bindings substantially. And we've also introduced bindings for Unity and Rust, the two projects I worked on this summer. So we'll just go over quickly. We've moved the C# bindings from just a single file in a folder to a full .NET solution. So what that lets us do is configure newer language features, target multiple versions, and just use a more modern build pipeline, which I think should really improve maintainability and just allow us to port to new versions of C#. I've gone through and minimized the usage of the dynamic keyword. We were looking at getting libmapper running on like iPhones and other mobile devices, and not all support just-in-time compilers. So the dynamic keyword requires that in C#, so this removes some barriers to potentially getting libmapper running on those platforms in C#. The old bindings did not have standardized doc comments, so I've gone through and added XML doc comments so we can automatically generate user guides, and your supported editors will show up in line hints and all the fun stuff. I've also modernized some of the older, less idiomatic code, so we're using properties now instead of getter and setter methods, which aren't really a thing in C# normally. And the most annoying part was the list class for libmapper lists was the exact same name as the built-in list type. So if you used both in the same code, you had to fully specify one of them. So that's been fixed. I renamed it to mapper list. We've also gone from you had to compile the C# file yourself and drag around the DLL to now having a publish NuGet package. For those who don't know, NuGet is the standardized package manager for C#. So any C# project anyone wants to work on can install libmapper bindings with a couple clicks in an editor or one command on the command line. That did require a rename of the C# package from mapper to libmapper.net because there's already multiple packages named mapper. So we needed to diversify and get ourselves apart a little bit. And finally, I extended support to more .NET versions. So basically, any version of C# you want to use, libmapper will support now, as opposed to, I believe it was just .NET Standard 2 before. So greatly expanded support there. Unity is the new main integration. This is what I was hired to work on this summer. So what we were looking for with Unity is we wanted something easy to use, even for non-developers, and ideally without any code. We also need something flexible because we don't know because Unity is used for a lot of things, games, visualizations, art installations. So we needed to minimize the amount of opinions that we enforced on other people, because we don't know what you're going to make with Unity. And we also needed to make sure it was extensible so that if someone's use case wasn't something we thought of, it could be modified to fit that use case. So the current feature set of the Unity bindings is it allows automatic discovery of properties that can be exposed as signals. It can automatically instance similar Unity objects. So you can of course disable that if that's not what you want, but objects with the same name next to each other in the hierarchy will be automatically instanced. It's completely configurable via the in-editor UI, and for 99% of cases, I'd say, you don't need to write any code. There's an extension API if you do want to write code to add support for more types of Unity components or things that we haven't thought of yet. It can automatically convert between Unity types and libmapper types, so you don't need to write any code to convert a Unity three-dimensional vector into a libmapper vector. It'll automatically do all the conversions there. It is very well optimized now. It has very small impact on frame timing, even on very low-end devices. And it supports most modern versions of Unity. I haven't tested it with older ones, but I suspect it'll also work with Unity 2018. So I have a demo here. I'm going to pull up to show you guys the new features. So this is a demo we were making of a magic mirror sort of thing. I don't know if anyone's seen them. They're like little mirrors on servos that can articulate to look at the closest person. So what we have here is the library installed by these two extensions. And we can see over here on the right, on your root object, you place a libmapper device. I'll go into why this is named something else now. You can configure the polling intervals and if it's non-blocking. From what we've seen, you shouldn't need to enable this, but you might if it's causing too much issues. If it's too slow, sorry. So then what you do is anywhere where you have something interesting you want to be available via libmapper, you place this libmapper component list component on it, and you can just drag and drop interesting things into this list, and they'll appear as libmapper signals. So you can see if I start this up and also start up webmapper, which I forgot to do, you can see we have our simulation here, and I had dragged on the transform of this object and a light. This is a Unity prefab, so there's a light here too. And you can see it's showing the color and intensity of the light and the position, rotation, scale on that transform. And if you want, it's as easy as, let's say, I'll stop it here. And let's say you want, okay, this is a bug we're currently working on, the demo effect strikes. It's likely something in the core. So let's say you want to expose some properties of this collider, like you want to make the area of influence for the mirror bigger or smaller as via libmapper. All you have to do is just drag this and drop it, and that's it. So next time this runs, come over here, you can see there's now a radius signal for that, and it's instanced with a minimum and maximum, and yeah, it's just that easy. And we hope that this is enough for people. If people start running into issues like this isn't enough, it should be fairly easy to extend with the component API to make it fit what you need from Unity. But yeah, this is we think this pretty much fits those goals of an easy to use integration of Unity with libmapper. And yeah, any questions or comments about that? Anything else you want me to show with that?
Anyone have any specific questions about the Unity or C# findings?
Anything anyone didn't understand about the Unity setup?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously, just for context, it's important. Everyone knows this is, as with other libmapper stuff, this is all publicly available online on GitHub. So you can always look into it later.
Yeah,
I could throw one question just to, of course, it's a lot of thanks, Kyle. A lot of what you're showing me is completely new to me. I've done some minimal work in Unreal Engine. So several years ago, I just ran some simple tests to get open sound control into Unreal Engine. Is that how kind of C# is operating? Like it's providing kind of gateways for OSC type messaging? Is that, or is it something different?
No, so the libmapper native library is actually loaded in Unity. There's no extra OSC bridge here. I believe a previous project actually tried to do that with Unity, but no, this is all native. The C# is directly invoking the C library.
Fantastic.
So it's fast, little overhead, and very efficient.
Great, thank you.
All right. Okay. So I guess with that, I can just quickly go on to the last demo effect. Lovely. The last part, which is the new Rust bindings. So for those who don't know, Rust is a systems programming language, a lot like C++, with a big focus on compile time memory safety. The whole ethos is that if it compiles, it's not going to segfault. And so when making libmapper bindings for this, I tried as hard as I could to make that all work together. So the goals were to make it safe, as in you can't screw up with pointers or anything you can to introduce memory unsafety. Idiomatic, because the thing I hate most is writing C in a language that's not C. And with as little abstraction as possible so that everyone can still use basically just libmapper without any fluff on top. So it's mostly feature complete. There's still some missing odds and ends. Callback support hopefully is coming soon. It's a bit difficult. It's compatible everywhere libmapper is, and it is fully documented with online documentation automatically generated. So just as an example of the sort of safety benefits Rust has, you can see this example code here. We create a graph, then a device using that graph. So if you have multiple devices, you can use the graph as optimization. Then you free the graph and try to make a signal. So by default in C, for example, this would be a segmentation fault. This isn't safe because the device contains a hidden reference to the graph. But with the Rust bindings, this is actually a compiler error. So you cannot compile code that would do this. You can see the compiler notes that graph is borrowed in the device, freed here, but later used there. So one of the big advantages of Rust is stuff like this, and our libmapper bindings fully integrate to prevent you from, well, mostly prevent you from shooting yourself in the foot. And I think that's all I have to talk about on bindings. If there's anything anyone wanted to ask? No? Okay. I think that's it for me then.
Could you just say a little bit more about Rust, just basic stuff, like what is Rust?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
where it might be used? How it might be used?
So Rust is a systems language. It's a lot like C, C++. You can use it embedded on the web. Basically anywhere C compiles to, Rust can probably compile to. It's used extensively in Firefox and the Linux kernel now, I think. And the whole point of Rust is as much checks are done at compile time as possible. Like, you shouldn't be able to compile code that has memory errors or causes memory leaks. And obviously that's a very nice set of checks and balances to have. So I saw an opportunity to let you use libmapper in that ecosystem. The other advantage is, of course, it's a more modern language. It has a standardized package manager and build system. So it's a bit easier to get up and running with Rust than, say, C, for example. I have you can see the Rust bindings here. We have examples for like setting up signals, devices, graphs, making maps. This is all on GitHub. And you can you just have a look at some of the samples here. Like this one is a scanner that just prints out every device available on the shared graph. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Seems very, very clear and comprehensive, Kyle. Thanks.
Thanks. I think that's it for me, at least for now.
Yeah. We hand it over to Matt now.
Oh,
Sure.
actually, wait. I have to stream for Matt. Sorry.
Yeah, it's actually up to you, Kyle. We can either chat about the web stuff first or Maplet first, but if you're ready to go with
I can
web stuff,
here. I can do. Here's a sec.
Sure.
Not this one. Here we go.
Cool.
So share from the start. Okay. I will
Cool.
mute and let you do the introduction.
Yeah, so Kyle and I are going to try co-presenting this presentation, and so I'll ask Kyle to switch slides and such, and we'll see how it goes. Co-presenting from different rooms in the same building, so very convoluted and silly way of doing it, but we'll give it a go. So yeah, like we mentioned and Joe mentioned in the introduction, one of the things we've been working on over the summer, but has been sort of an idea that I've been trying to push towards for a bit longer than that now, is bringing the libmapper to the browser. And so basically being able to either map to some web audio application running in the browser, as that's gotten quite performant and popular in the last couple of years, or taking advantage of sort of the countless front-end UI frameworks that the web offers. Obviously, lots of work in the open source community and beyond into building these super powerful frameworks and such. So leveraging libmapper in those ways was something we wanted to try and work towards. So maybe flip to the next for us, Kyle. Perfect. So this is a quick one. We'll talk a little bit about why we want to do this. And then there's two main components to this project, MapperD and libmapper.js, which we'll both talk about. And then we'll talk about some future work. So we can move on to the next slide. Cool. And so this is a bit about what I was saying. And so, of course, as we all know, libmapper, it's a great open source project that we're using to establish mappings between signals, right? And so one thing is libmapper relies on TCP, especially for communication on that network. But then the issue is that the browser or modern web browsers are sandboxed in such a way that you're not able to do direct communication in and out sort of across that sandbox border. And so with that in mind, we're wondering, like, how on earth do we get libmapper to the browser? And so our proposed answer is what we'll talk about, which is a combination of two pieces of software, MapperD and libmapper.js. Cool. So I'll pass now sort of back to Kyle, and you can chat about this one.
I hate having to. Okay, there we go. So MapperD is our MapperD is the backend component of this. So we need some way to get libmapper available to sandboxed environments such as the browser. And so we decided to start from the ground up and creating a brand new piece of software to allow that. Some of our issues are, for some of you who are more aware, the webmapper backend is quite similar in idea, like bringing libmapper functionality to the browser, but we couldn't really reuse it as it was designed mostly just for a session manager. So it probably would have been more work to modify that. So we needed to make something performant and reusable. We wanted something that wasn't strongly opinionated about a specific application. So we maybe in the future, even webmapper could be migrated towards MapperD. We wanted just a backend that can be used for any application in the browser, or even not the browser. The backend MapperD is designed in a way that doesn't favor one client language or framework or environment over the other. So if you have some random domain-specific language where you can access WebSockets in HTTP, you can potentially just use MapperD to bring libmapper to that DSL. So we settled on an interface of a hybrid REST API over HTTP and WebSockets. Reasoning for that is we needed some sort of stateful session with the WebSockets, but doing request and response communication over a WebSocket is pain. So we needed to also bring in the REST API for more managerial tasks. Sorry. It also has wide compatibility and standardized. We didn't reinvent the wheel. And most importantly, it is, of course, usable from the browser environment. The entire interface is session-based. So by default, when you connect via the WebSocket, you create a session. But that doesn't have to be the case necessarily. You could potentially have multiple sessions on one WebSocket. And the reason for doing everything via sessions is it allows cleanup in case someone navigates away from the page, closes the browser or whatever. It allows the server to know that these will probably not be used again. And so it can clean up devices and signals that shouldn't be visible anymore. The backend is also compatible with multiple sessions at once. That's one of the key advantages of MapperD. So you can have one MapperD instance running on a Raspberry Pi, and a whole bunch of clients on the network can all use that one instance to communicate with the libmapper graph. In terms of API design for MapperD, we decided to go with little to no abstraction over the just libmapper C API, because as said earlier, we want this to be available to be used for almost anything. So the goal was to make the entire API available, but so far we've managed to get signals and devices and some graph stuff available. There's some simplifications, some abstractions. For example, polling, it doesn't make sense to spam WebSocket messages or HTTP messages to poll a device, so that's all handled internally. And pointers are not exposed as raw addresses. Instead, the client is sent an alphanumeric identifier it can use to refer to that device or that signal in future requests. And also a limitation of our transport protocol is that we only have doubles and 32-bit integers available, because JSON, which we chose for message handling, it only supports 64-bit floats. and so we can only really encode doubles and 32-bit integers as signal types. In terms of compatibility, the backend is written in C#. This was one of the main reasons we improved the C# bindings. So it can run anywhere C# does, which is most places. It's far more performant than a Python backend. Because of that shouldn't be there. Sorry. One of the downsides though is that there's pretty high memory usage at the moment. It's not exactly light on RAM, and there's still a couple threading bugs we need to work through. It's mostly stable, but there's some problems. And as mentioned before, we're using JSON for data transfer, which is standardized, widely available. Most languages have some sort of JSON support. Just does mean that it's a bit inefficient for data transfer over the WebSocket. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to Matt, who's going to talk about the first client for MapperD, which is libmapper.js, which is the browser half of this duo. Sorry, one sec, I need to.
Cool. Thanks, Kyle. I think that summed up MapperD super well. We can move on to the next slide, but yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the front end, the browser side API for libmapper.js. Interestingly enough, oh, there we go. Perfect. I was taking a few seconds to load Kyle's screen. Anyway, so like we said, libmapper.js is a browser-side JavaScript API. And the reason I keep reiterating this is in the past, you may have heard libmapper did support JavaScript bindings, but those were node.js bindings, which is pretty exclusively backend bindings, so very similar to the Python bindings. But we really wanted to, like I said, focus on front end. And so here's a little graphic that shows how libmapper.js is communicating with MapperD, which of course enables the users to bring WebMapper signals in and out of the browser. And so MapperD, it's actually a daemon, hence the D. And so essentially the way we look at this is that MapperD would be sort of always running somewhere in the background with a direct connection to WebMapper devices using the C API. And then you see on the right-hand side that libmapper.js, like Kyle mentioned, is establishing a connection over HTTP to do some management tasks. And then there's some bidirectional WebSockets that is communicating data for both incoming and outgoing signals. So we can move to the next slide, Kyle. And so, right, when you start up a device on libmapper.js, what it's going to do first is asynchronously establish that connection to the MapperD server. And then, like I said, after that, all the rest of the communication is done via WebSockets, since they're a little faster than doing HTTP. Go ahead, Kyle. Right, so let's talk a little bit about sort of how it's used. We're still working on fully supporting all of the different ways JavaScript works, but we can think about a little bit of a scenario here, which is we might want to map some input controller or something like the T-stick or the spine or some other controller you're working on that has libmapper to parameters of a web synth. And this synth could be deployed via Faust or something you've custom built using the Web Audio API. But the one thing we think about is that typically these will have some sort of UI already established, typically sliders, knobs, all those types of things that would have some HTML element associated with them to actually do the updating. And so you can see here, obviously the first line, just some imports. All we're importing is libmapper device and libmapper signal. We'll first initialize a device very similar to how you would do it in the C API, which is we call libmapper device equal libmapper device create, pass a name, etc. This is the asynchronous communication I'm talking about, so that await keyword there. From there, it's as easy as grabbing the HTML element that's associated with some parameter of your synthesizer or other multimedia system. In this case, we're just grabbing the slider that would do pitch. Obviously, sometimes you might do MIDI keyboards, etc. But in this case, we'll treat it as an HTML element. You grab that ID, and then you're able to bind that ID and therefore that element to a libmapper signal using as simple as a .add signal, pass that HTML element, and then specify whether it's an incoming or outgoing. In this case, it's incoming. And then sort of behind the scenes, what that lets you do is anytime it receives a new signal, it'll automatically look for any event handlers that are already associated with that element and call or sort of invoke that handler using any found updated values. So that's sort of our programmatic way of doing it. It's very, very straightforward. We're trying to keep it sort of as lightweight as possible while following the typical WebMapper workflow. So we move on to the next scenario, Kyle. Cool. And so this is sort of us envisioning how we work the other way, which is mapping some web UI components maybe to some synth or to some other system. So here we've done a very simple sort of 3 sliders, maybe like a mixer desk or something like this. Of course, we're trying to keep it simple, for example, but you can make it as robust and as interesting as your web programming allows. In this case, we're doing an auto discover. And so you can see that in your inputs, you're specifying them as type range, and then a custom HTML attribute called mapper signal name. And so slider 1, slider 2, slider 3. And then in your script, it's as simple as defining a libmapper device, but then putting auto discover equals true. And so what this will do, it'll automatically discover any of these outgoing signals and bind them to the typical what you'd expect. And so all the names will appear, in your session manager, and you can bind to them. And then similarly, any values that are changed through an on-change event with the inputs will then be passed along to the WebMapper graph network. We can move on, Kyle. Thank you. Cool. So we'll talk a little bit about future work. So like Joe mentioned, we're making good progress here on the WebMapper bindings, but the initial work is going to be presented next month at the IEEE Symposium on the Internet of Sounds. But we do have some future work planned as well, which is continuing to implement the remainder of the libmapper API in MapperD. So that's something that Kyle was mentioning. There's some more features to implement. Something I'll be working on is continuing to develop support for additional front-end workflows. And so when I say front-end workflows, I mean both the fact that JavaScript is so multi-paradigmed programming language. So people work in functional programming, people work in all sorts of ways with JavaScript. So we want to sort of be able to support their workflows. But then, like I also said, lots of front-end frameworks exist. So these are things like Vue, React, Svelte. There's like 100 new ones every single day. So we'll try and support some of those main front-end frameworks, something like in React, maybe a use libmapper hook, et cetera, for the folks that are familiar with the React ecosystem. And then, of course, as part of research, we also want to properly evaluate this system with users. And so that could be musicians, could be web developers, et cetera. So that'll be our next bit of future work. And I think we have one more slide here. Right. So we do have it available on GitHub for those that are interested. So it's as simple as for each project, github.com/libmapper/ that project name. So do feel free to leave any comments there and let us know how you'd want to use it, et cetera. And we'll certainly keep collaborating. So I think that does it for this portion.
Great. Thanks, Al and Matt. Any questions? No questions?
No, that's fine. We're happy to take them asynchronously as well, offline.
Yeah, of course. So as Matt pointed out, a lot of new media projects are using web technologies now, like web audio and web MIDI and stuff like this. So this was a whole world that we did not have access to before. And with MapperD and libmapper.js, now we'll be able to kind of cross that wall into the browser sandbox. So I think we have written some scenarios, but probably should be able to make some pretty exciting projects in the near future. Okay, so if there's no other questions about that, then Matt has yet another project to present. You can see Kyle and Matt have both been very busy over the summer, especially. Though Matt's been working on this particular one for quite a while.
Yeah, cool. This one should be a reasonably short little presentation, but Yeah, share my own screen this time. Can you guys all see these slides now, Joe?
Yes.
Perfect. I'll move on to, hopefully, there we go. Cool. So alongside working on some web stuff with libmapper, I've also been working on another project, which is what I'm calling Maplet. And so what Maplet is it's a Eurorack module to try and bring sort of the libmapper workflow and mapping signals to physical modular synthesizers. And so I suspect a lot of us here either are very familiar with Eurorack or at least sort of have a working knowledge of Eurorack, and so I won't get into the nitty-gritty of it, but it's a type of modular synthesizer, very popular and famous format for working with modular synthesizers. There's a huge community, both of musicians as well as module suppliers and designers, etc. And so one thing I've noticed in my own sort of dabbling with Eurorack, as well as seeing what other people are working on, is that a lot of the time it's used for sort of what they quote unquote call generative music, where the patch really plays itself using sequencers and all sorts of other modules. And thus, like the human performance of the patch is really in building out that patch rather than like perhaps the way you'd play guitar and where you're directly working. It's a bit of a different mental model there. And so my question was, can libmapper support for Eurorack sort of enable more performative interactions from users? And so towards that, been working on a system, building out a prototype to do this. And so a few of the goals here, like I said, the main goal, provide a mechanism to integrate libmapper with the Eurorack modular synthesizers. Of course, we need it to fit well within the existing Eurorack paradigm and workflow. We don't want to have people that are used to working with Eurorack be like, how on earth do I use this? We want it just to sort of fit in as another utility module. Of course, the standard is we need to communicate with other modules in the Eurorack case and system via control voltage. And then also the system goal is be compact, right? As a utility module, you don't want it taking up a ton of your space. And so I said less than 8 HP, but as we'll see, currently it's sitting around 6. So here's a quick system architecture diagram for Maplet. There's 2 main components that are sort of driving the entire thing. First is the Tiny Pico. It's an ESP32 microcontroller, Arduino compatible, onboard Wi-Fi, and a good amount still of GPIO, despite being a pretty small form factor. I think they claim it's like the smallest form factor for ESP32, but I think that's perhaps not fully true. Regardless, though, very small and still reasonably inexpensive as well, about $20 a board plus all the other fees and such, shipping, etc. And then MCP 4728, it's a quad digital to analog converter. And so this is how we're taking those digital signals and converting them to control voltage to sort of send out via patch cables to your other modules. 12-bit output, essentially with especially things like pitch for control voltage, you need to have a reasonable amount of resolution in order to get the range of pitch you're looking for. And so from experience as well as seeing what other people sort of in the DIY and Eurorack community use, this one has been sufficient for a lot of projects, and that's why we're using this one for now. So here's a couple pictures just showing the development from breadboard to version 0.1 or 001, I should say, assembled with some acrylic case. So we're making good progress there. And then the last couple of weeks, I've been working on designing front panel and circuit board, make it a little more polished. I'm far from a graphic designer, so you can appreciate my very minimal design. Essentially with KiCad, we were able to manufacture both the PCB and the front panel separately, and then included some extra system parts that weren't on that breadboard, which includes regulator circuits so that we can power it via the typical Eurorack power rail, some indicator LEDs for each signal. And so essentially that LED would say whether there's something mapped to the channel or the signal, so that you're not wondering if you're getting 0 because the mapping's not connected or because your system's just outputting zeros on the map, for instance. And then we're going to integrate an RGB NeoPixel sort of as a module wide or module level status indicators. So there's some firmware work to do there. But again, that'll be able to sort of show quickly the status of either the graph, of the module, of the signals, sort of, etc. So here's a quick picture of a half assembled sitting in the case, as well as version 0. So like I said, the version 0.01, the acrylic was 8 HP, but with the new design, we were able to sort of push things together to 6 HP, and look forward to seeing it more in modules fully assembled. So some future work, like Joe mentioned, presenting the prototype in the paper about this module at Audio Mostly here next month. So looking forward to getting some feedback and hearing what people think about that. There are some existing issues with the PCB design. It was my first time using KiCad and designing a PCB, so I made a couple mistakes that need to be resolved and get some new boards shipped in the mail. And then, of course, formal evaluation of Maplet with Eurorack musicians, right? This is the most important part in terms of making sure that it's valid for the system, because if the Eurorack users don't want to use it or find it difficult, then there's no sense in having the tool support. So part of that, this is in sort of reverse order, but going to assemble several modules to share with those interested, really make sure we can get some modules in people's hands so they can tinker with it. And then there's some suggested new features for version 2 of Maplet. Like I said, more firmware to do all these driving of LEDs and such. Wi-Fi network settings helper, because of course every libmapper device needs to be on a shared network, and so we've thought about just making sure at least that it's easy enough to update your Wi-Fi credentials directly through like Arduino IDE, but maybe there's a better way of doing it as well. We'll look into that. Incoming CV. So currently Maplet only supports outgoing CV. So essentially outgoing in terms of relative to the module. So you're able to map from, say, some other input controller to Maplet, which then your outgoing CV to the Eurorack. And so working in reverse, you could imagine it'd be interesting to do some sort of incoming CV, maybe from a sequencer or from an LFO, and then map those via libmapper out to some other external system, Unity, etc. And then version 2, maybe a little bit prettier of a front panel. We'll give it another try with the graphic design and see if we can make it more interesting. But yeah, that's basically a quick summary of Maplet. I'm happy to answer any other questions as well. This one's also on GitHub, so please do leave any comments or suggestions. If you are a Eurorack person and want to give it a try, as soon as they're fully assembled and tested, I'd be more than happy to share as well. So thanks for listening to this brief talk.
Thanks, Matt. You could mention maybe your, at least in my opinion, your go-to demo is using MediaPipe hand tracking as an input. So this is a nice example, using a webcam and hand tracking and turning that into control voltages on your Eurorack. That's nice.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Good. Yeah, thanks for that. The whole Eurorack scene, I think, leads to a specific type of sound that I think musicians are looking for. I'm wondering if you're thinking about how gesture controllers or portable, more DMI type systems might have like embedded Eurorack systems, and could this be maybe leading to controllers that have their audio system built into the unit itself based on kind of the modularity of Eurorack technology? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's sort of the whole DMI now, like the input controller, the mapping, and the synthesis, whether that's modules or whether that's Eurorack specific or not. Yeah, I think that would be super interesting. Obviously not what this module specifically is designed for, but I think it would definitely lead itself to more experimentation. People that may have Eurorack and are interested in sort of this custom input controller / DMI space. Yeah. Maybe it's a great entryway into experimenting with that. But then, yeah, I can certainly see sort of the cohesive unit resulting from that.
So, because when I think of Eurorack, I guess I think more of things like maybe Hans Zimmer or Nine Inch Nails. I mean, and some of the work they've done more not to play it live per se, right?
Sure.
But create the kind of musical layers, fabrics, whatever for something. And so I'm asking myself, what sort of mapping technology is even needed in a situation like that? And I could see, again, like that, the idea of modularity. I was thinking of, I don't know, some of you probably know Dirk Stromberg in Singapore. He's an American guy there who's been building his own devices and instruments, and they often have their own, audio, 1/8 inch audio output jack or something. And
Sure.
the technology underlying that, right, is well, it's not Eurorack per se, but I'm wondering if that's like an obvious thing for someone who wants, their instrument just to have those kind of sonic features of the Eurorack sound. Yeah.
Yeah. If I could jump in, Andrew, I'd say since the time that you were in the IDMIL, there's been a number of students in the IDMIL working on embedded synthesis, specifically because, it was interesting for them as well, but it's something Marcelo's been pushing for a while, that it would be interesting to have synthesizers embedded in the DMIs. And some of them we have still had mappings happening internally, so you could still access and modify the mappings using a tool like libmapper. See, Casey has their hand up.
Yeah, I just to jump in, there also has been quite a lot of advancement with, I'm starting to see, say, keyboards and so forth that are coming out with empty spaces for Eurorack modules. For some of you who were in some of the early T-Stick meetings, I know I talked about wanting to work with the T-Stick and libmapper and Eurorack, because MIDI is quite frustrating. So I definitely think that this is a really good avenue for that. I have more boring questions about it, just because things like power draw aren't on the documentation, but I will be happy to give it a try once we have a few that are put together.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Hanzhang, you have your hand up, and would you mind introducing yourself?
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry, I came in late.
It's quite all right.
Oh, why it's looking up anyway? Sorry. Yeah, I'm actually a musician, and I play Eurorack a lot, and I'm also a programmer actually here based at San Diego, California. And I have like particular interest in this topic, like of Eurorack, because I just work with it. Well, it's very exciting, first of all, to have this like wireless communication with this module, and then have like all the gestures incorporated in the system. I just have like a pretty detailed question. I don't know, because I've read some reviews from other instrument designers that like using Wi-Fi in a ESP and then in an instrument might introduce some noise. I'm wondering if you have like encountered problems like that, and how to deal with that.
Sure, yeah, that's a good point. I personally haven't ran into any noise issues with Wi-Fi module on board. Certainly that would be something worth taking a keen, like a close look at as part of our evaluation phase that'll be upcoming. But no, I haven't seen anything, nor have I really seen any major latency issues with the Wi-Fi module as well, which was another concern about doing Eurorack sort of over the network via libmapper. But both of those things definitely we'll keep an eye on as we work towards evaluation.
Got it. Yeah, I'll be very interested to see your demo.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So I tried to keep it short for the sake of time today, but I'm more than happy to maybe record a proper demo and share, or host another meeting at some point soon.
Yeah, that'd be exciting.
I guess one thing we could imagine with the Eurorack form factor is it would be not a problem to use a much larger antenna. For example, we don't need to use like a little chip antenna on the Tiny Pico. I know there's existing work kind of from the NIM community about trying to use directional Wi-Fi antennas, for example, because obviously this is, if you're in a room with hundreds or thousands of people and they all have their phones trying to connect to networks, then it's kind of an adversarial situation if your instrument is also trying to use wireless communication. So people have used, directional antenna arrays so that they could still walk around on stage and kind of reject all the wireless signals from the other side of the stage. Yeah, interesting issue. Yeah.
Just to note, be worth talking to the Bella folks, because from talking with them, they have quite a lot of experience with noise when they're doing the trill, and it's a power supply thing. Digital modules, depending on how the power supply is done, that's really where the problem is, as much as the Wi-Fi itself.
Good to know. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Just my mind is spinning, but from something that Andrew said earlier, I think there's always because it's talking about Eurorack used in non-performance scenarios, but I think there's always an interest. This is kind of the DMI scene in a nutshell, is taking studio technologies that could only be used offline and using them, bringing them back into live performance, right? So things like synthesis was something that was difficult, like digital synthesis in particular was difficult to use in real time, and now it's trivial. So it's basically anything that's useful in the studio, we should at least be asking the question, is this also interesting to use on stage or in new contexts? It doesn't have to be on stage either, right? Looks like Jean-Michel disappeared again, but Edu, do you want to? We did introductions earlier. Do you want to introduce yourself for the video we're recording?
Yes, sorry, I'm a bit late. I was a bit late. So for the ones who doesn't know me, I'm Edu Menezes. I am a research director, the research director at SAT here in Montreal. And before that, I was a PhD at IDMIL. So I've been working with multiple projects that were touched by Andrew and Joe, pretty much from 2016 to now. And we here at SAT being tackling with libmapper as well, playing with it, including my text that was done recently, more than a year ago with Ray Butcher. So that's it. We don't have any presentation, but we would. I would really like to be around and chat about the libmapper future and what we can continue doing in terms of integration with our system.
Great, thanks, Edu. So just before we jump on to this discussion, I should mention maybe Matt and Edu, you should talk about this issue of how do you discover the network that's being used by configure the network that's going to be used by the Eurorack module, or discover it, because I think, Edu, you've already given some thought to basically this exact same problem with your graduate work, right? Because you had this idea that there was a kind of a performance node that would host some synthesis and mapping and stuff like this, right? And it's a question of how, and also with the work that you did with the T-Stick, when we have embedded networks and things without screens and keyboards on them, how do we make it user friendly to configure the networking part? Once it's configured, it just works, hypothetically. But
that's it. That's my speech with everyone who wants to use Wi-Fi, libmapper, OC query, whatever. That's network based and Wi-Fi. Is that when it works, is magical. when it doesn't, well, prepare for the world of pain. Yeah, prepare for the world of pain. But not surprising, actually. I would say surprised enough, but not surprisingly, I'm still working on that. And here at SAT, we are in the middle of a project more towards IoT for media arts, and we are again tackling this problem. So not the solution, but the answer that we are giving right now is really working a bit harder on the Puara modules that are pretty much what we use here to try to make configuration less painful. And by working on that, it means pretty much refactoring the whole thing to make sure it's a bit more user friendly and less convoluted to configure the network. So one of the problems and complaints is that if you are used to do that 10 or 20 times a day, it's not that hard. But if you're trying your instrument for the first time, it's really painful to get through the process that just to connect your instrument to your computer or whatever. It's kind of a painful process. So right now, what we have is a Wi-Fi. It's pretty much a web server on the ESP that we can just use to configure it. The problem is that to access this web UI, you need to be in the same network. So there's still some work to do before you reach to that point. So just to pass the word and try to kick off this discussion, I think one of the greatest things that not I did, but it was in the realm of Quora, was the work of the T3 that with the handshake thing. So actually, Albert and Paul Buster, they did this for the T3, and for me, I think that's a good avenue of exploration. For the ones who never saw this project, it's pretty much a tree of T-sticks. It's pretty much what it is, and you can connect the T-sticks to this tree and make them part of the same network. And that's being done by a very hacky handshake between the T-stick and the tree via USB. So that's the state that we have right now, but we are planning to make this a bit better. So ideally, if you have a computer or so that's my dream. If you have a computer or a Raspberry Pi or whatever, that you can run this small script, you can just connect your device and be in the same network. So that would be, I guess, the least painful way to do it. Doesn't solve any problems regarding connectivity on the Wi-Fi, but at least makes configuration a bit easier.
Yeah, I feel like it would be nice if we could use NFC somehow for this part. Yeah,
we all need to be
maybe bring back the cable. Yeah.
Yeah, at least if you connect once and make sure you handshake, then you can release the cable. But in the end, cable is the best tech for doing that. Even if it's just for the handshaking, I mean, it's foolproof. You connect, you do your thing, and that's it. So it's,
yeah. I think that the quote was, "Wires aren't that bad compared to wireless," or something like. Anyway, we should move on with. So Andrew had requested that we discuss support for non-developers. Edu, just to get you caught up, we're recording this if you want to check later, and I'd be super interested in your feedback and also Jean-Michael's on the work that was presented earlier. So Kyle presented new bindings for C# and Rust and for Unity, like integration with Unity, and then together Matt and Kyle presented some tools to get libmapper into the browser sandbox. So basically a daemon called mapper-d that translates the libmapper network into WebSocket traffic and I guess some HTTP as well. And then they've designed a library for JavaScript. So with some pretty interesting scenarios for integrating libmapper with existing workflows, like for discovering signals and mapping in and out of the browser. Anyway, I can send you some links as well, but it would be great to have your feedback, and Jean-Michael's as well. All right. So sorry, Andrew, you had requested as a, I think you think of yourself as a user of libmapper, probably a feature requester, but not a feature implementer.
Yeah.
A bug reporter, definitely, over the years as well. So very many thanks for that, which is hard work in itself, especially sometimes trying to find a way of making a bug, so you can replicate it and report it properly.
Yeah. Could I provide some
yeah.
context?
Yes,
So
please. For it.
Can I share a screen too? Would that actually work? Pin
Should.
move to, where do I hit share? I think there's share. Sorry, I don't use, it's probably not gonna let me do this without restarting Google. I don't use Jitsi very often. Let me see if I can get this to work. It's probably not so dramatic. I'm just going to skip it. So context, folks, just to give you a bit of context, I was just looking at my archived files, and I've got a folder that basically is all sorts of Max programming for what I would call my controllers, my control devices, my DMIs, whatever. And I've got 28 listed there, and some of them are things that are you probably know. Like I've been mostly working with the Carlax a lot, most recently the Carlax. But all right, back on.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. What's interesting is that the mappings that I did, sometimes they were for formal compositions. So you can imagine if I were to somehow pass this on to somebody to play on, they'd need the mappings. Many were more just for improvisations, but they were still central. The mappings were still central to being able to improvise the same kind of space each time I was using one of these devices. So libmapper has been hugely important flow. And again, looking back at my files, I was just trying to find like the oldest mapping file I can find from 2009. It's saved as a text file. I think wasn't there XML stuff at one point, and then of course now JSON, and I have done my best, from over the years as things evolve. Now as a non-developer to, of course, port everything over to the latest, newest, and rewriting mappings. Like, it's a lot of work to rewrite mappings, and anything that coincides with changes in how Max runs libmapper too. All those things needed to be updated. Like just recently, Joe knows I'm just moving from some Jamoma objects to CNMAT objects just to manage like OSC messages inside Max with the latest Mac infrastructure, so Apple computer infrastructure. So that's not really the libmapper. But so I guess my main questions for everyone was really just as a non-developer, is there any kind of easy path to get up and running quickly? I have some literacy with Git, so I'm pretty confident. I mean, I can clone stuff, I can modify, update, whatever. I'm not a heavy programmer, but I can get stuff off of Git. I can get it running, generally speaking. Although, as we were talking, I was reviewing like the webmapper Git, and I downloaded something there. I think it was November 2023. It's listed as a standalone, and still, when I open up that standalone folder, to me it still looks like a bunch of source files. So I'm not actually sure where to go even once I see that. And again, standalone to me also is a bit confusing, because my understanding of a lot of this is that the standalone app is actually something like Google Chrome, not webmapper per se. But this also might be me like trying to catch up just to figure out what's going on. And I saw from Kyle, right? I saw your quick command line, how you launched webmapper. So I realized too that webmapper can be opened in different ways, is what I'm getting. And now, of course, you've talked about the mapper daemon and the libmapper JS, so I can see these uses. So I guess that's my fundamental question, right? Is there a path, and what is the path actually, to get up and running if I don't necessarily have a strong command over command line, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, these are perennially good questions, right? And it's and partly it's that technology is like webmapper, for example. When Chrome changes versions, sometimes bits of it get broken and have to be modified. So it's not like we can just have one version that just works forever. But I think the short answer is just something that we have been making some progress moving towards automating the process of building binaries that are downloadable and just usable, and also supporting package managers like Homebrew, which I was advocating for Andrew because he uses Mac. So that, you know, if you want to install libmapper as a system library, then you don't necessarily have to compile it yourself. Yeah, anyway, you use a kind of a trusted source like a package manager. Webmapper, yeah, your experience is not what it should have been. Obviously, if you downloaded something that's called a standalone, I would expect you to be able to kind of double click on it. And yes, in the case of Webmapper, it would probably open a Chrome tab, but it would do it automatically for you, and it would look like an application, you know, that you were launching rather than a folder full of source files. The tooling for kind of automatically building standalones out of Webmapper is one of the things that's kind of changed over the years and been broken, and then there were new tools that were used, and I haven't looked at it in a while. So obviously, I think that should probably be a priority. As much fun as it is to work on features of libmapper, if no one can build and configure maps, it's kind of useless. So the session management is really kind of the thing that needs work that's not getting it very much right now. We fix bugs.
When you folks talk about session too, you're simply meaning like a one instance of the GUI where you're seeing destinations and sources. Is that kind of
no?
What's,
so I think of a session. A session is kind of a bunch of activities happening temporally that we've decided to, you know, that you like a jam session or something like that, right? As you know from our early discussions about the way that libmapper works, is it was meant to support collaboration, kind of free interconnection of things, and so a lot of concepts end up having to be a bit ambiguous, right? Because there could be multiple interpretations, and so what a mapping is, for example, like you might load a file which has a bunch of maps, and I might load one. Our two files might actually involve some of the same signals, right? Some of the same maps. And so a map might kind of, if we say that, sometimes we say like a file might correspond to a session. It doesn't have to, right? Or maybe a session has several files, or you could think of it as different scenes. You know, it's kind of typical in lots of interactive media that there's kind of punctuated scenes where the interactivity changes. Anyway, so we try to build tools that support these kind of open workflows. So part of Brady's work that he did with partly under supervision by Marcelo, myself, and Edu, because he was working at the SAT doing my tax, was he made a Python module called Mapper Session, which is currently the back end of Webmapper, and it does support kind of a more interesting model for loading and saving maps. So it puts a tag on all the maps that have been loaded from a file, just uses the file name. And so part of the metadata of the map is that it's been loaded by a certain file. And that means in a recent version of Webmapper, you can actually unload specific files. And so it'll look for all the maps that have that tag and only remove those rather than, so you can kind of, the idea is that you could support this kind of punctuated scene-based interaction, like an installation or a piece, whatever you want to call it, where you're loading and unloading things. Obviously, I know you've done work where you're just directly interfacing with the admin network, the admin traffic, right? So as part of your piece, you might be loading and unloading individual maps. So Mapper Session just does that at the file level.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
And also it has the ability to, you can tell it to load a file and make the maps persistent. So if a device disappears and comes back, then it'll recreate the maps. Some stuff like that. I'm sure it still needs some work as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
I'm always like a fan of tutorials. That maybe is a whole other,
In what format do you think works I mean, maybe it's best. Is text good, or is it? Should we be doing a series of videos? Do you want to make a series of videos showing how to use stuff?
I probably have a few of those actually showing, me going through the libmapper processes. Actually, I did do one. What was that? That was, I think that was, so a while back, I showed a bunch of, I did a video on parallax techniques, the techniques that I use. And my whole ramble in English and in French was going on at the beginning while the webmapper was doing its thing, visually. Yeah. And so that was kind of fun.
I remember that video.
But even just keeping the Git comments area updated is a good, like, that's my go-to at the moment, right? I try to just read everything that's on the Git area. But you have your website, so I suppose a tutorial section on the libmapper.org website would make a lot of sense.
There is a tutorial section on the website.
Okay. Yeah. Anything about building though, like a webmapper?
There's tutorials for, if you could actually have a look and give comments, if you feel like something's missing or because it's easy to modify them. On the topic of the website, actually, in his spare time, while doing C#, Rust, Unity, and MapperD, Kyle has also been reworking the website. So we should have a better version of the website probably soon. We haven't done the old switcheroo yet, but it'll happen at some point.
I've popped it open, I guess, to like just tutorials from the ground up. Like, I have to run webmapper. How do I begin even to, roll that out?
Yeah. So these tutorials are more about how to get running with a specific language.
Yeah.
It's less about. So maybe we should do a tutorial that's like, okay, now my devices are running. Right? Now my devices are running. What do I do? Or a webmapper tutorial, maybe.
Before we go, I wonder if I could though ask how I can proceed, because I'm literally in the situation now of getting my libmapper. It's like I downloaded some of the compiled Max objects, and they seem to be working. Although I do have some error messages that I like to throw at you. But it'd be nice before we go if I could get a sense of maybe who I might speak to, just to maybe walk me through getting in that webmapper GUI active or operational, and I'm ready to do whatever. I got Python installed. I've got I'm good at following instructions. How about that?
Kyle, would you like to?
Yeah, hi. So those standalone webmapper things, there is actually a file you can just double click in it and it will open up webmapper. Though the standalone ones, I think Joe mentioned, are kind of outdated and a bit buggy, but they do work. I'm just trying to find, because I used it. I was a newcomer to this project a few months ago. I think you can just, in the standalone, just double click on the file named webmapper and it will open it up.
Yeah, on my computer, I have it in front of me here. It's missing a file extension, so my computer doesn't know what to open.
That is normal. It's executables on Mac OS don't have a file extension.
Yeah,
it's a weird thing.
And and of course there's the whole quarantine issue too, I guess, maybe. But when I double click, I get
right click on it and click open.
Yeah, that used to work, right?
Yeah, it should work. It worked for me.
So this, I think this kind of back and forth with error messages and stuff is perfect for something like a GitHub issue or a forum, because then you can actually paste in the, like, this is the error I got, and people can, it's a faster path to getting it working.
Yeah, because mine just opens with text editor,
right.
I get a bunch of garbly goop, so which is kind of wicked.
So anyway, under the hood, what's happening with webmapper is there's a Python's running a backend that then launches a Chrome tab and communicates with JavaScript running in that tab. So you can launch it, as Kyle did, by running just typing into terminal Python webmapper.py when you're in the right folder, and run it that way as well.
CD to the directory and then run the
Right.
code.
Yes. So that depends on libmapper being installed on your machine and the Python bindings as well. So you might still, well, just I don't know how you got it.
I have it all,
so,
but yeah, just
yeah. So this is why follow the directions. Even if it's as simple as that. And then when it doesn't work, I'm sorry, I know this makes you a guinea pig, but when it doesn't work, or if it doesn't work, paste the error message into an issue. And then ideally, we don't just help you get it running, but we also either fix the distribution so it's easier or fix the documentation so it's clearer for the next person.
I found the issue. I'll open a GitHub issue for it. The webmapper binary doesn't have the executable bit set, so he can't double click on it. He'll need to change mod it through the terminal first. So we should probably be doing that before we upload.
Right. And that was built through Py2App or something, right?
I don't know. I haven't looked at those.
Anyway, it was built with some tool that should be setting the executable bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
So
but as Kyle pointed out, those are not recent versions of webmapper anyway, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I think maybe I should be doing like you did, Kyle. I should just be running something with the latest version of webmapper available, like running from source, I guess is what you would say.
Yeah, I've run webmapper from source recently because the older version has issues where like sometimes maps just won't connect. You'll draw the arrow and it disappears, never actually connects, or it does and it's like in a broken state. So yeah.
And if I recollect well too, you always have to be sensitive to the version of libmapper on which the webmapper source code was developed, right? Like they go hand in hand generally, or with some flexibility.
Usually it's fine, I think. I don't know. Joe can correct me if I'm wrong.
It should.
Yeah.
It shouldn't. I mean, I'm not saying you should run, from 5 years apart or something like that.
Right.
In general, it's not something that should be an issue.
Yeah. So you're telling me, the best go-to right now is probably the Git, the webmapper repository on Git, and just read through, follow those, give it a go, give it a whirl. I think you're what you're telling me.
Yeah, I think there's instructions, isn't there? It might not be.
Well, but this is the whole point, right, of this topic, is that yes, there are instructions, but there's still a barrier there, right, for maybe people who aren't fully up to speed on the jargon. Even like I asked you, like, what's a session? What exactly do you mean by a session? And these are important details for someone who's just hitting the ground running here. It's like, what exactly is that?
But that's an interesting. I think that's an interesting topic, right? Because when you say what is a session, I think a session is a topic for discussion, right? It's not my job to tell you what a session is. It's not that it's not my job. It's like my idea of what a session might not be the same as what your idea of a session is. And a project like libmapper, ideally, we want to be able to support both of those kind of mental models. Now, of course, terminology, like the semantics of it, does make a difference, because if we want to be able to talk about it with each other, we need a term, and maybe session's not the best term, right? But it's kind of funny that some of our terminology, it's okay that it's ambiguous, but somehow we have to communicate that to users, right? That we're not being obtuse. It's actually that it's not something that's so specific. It is like a more general idea of just managing maps, one or more maps over time, right? And one of the ways of dealing with it is thinking of them as collections, or like a state or a scene or something like that, which in terms of the digital version of that could be a file, or it could be a script, right? I mean, it's kind of the same thing, right? Like when you have in some of your programming, you'd have basically a script. I mean, really, the words program and script are the same, right? We just kind of attach extra meaning to them. But at some point in time, you were executing something. You were creating some maps, or destroying some maps, or modifying some maps. And
that was
anyway. And this is not the only way to think about it. So we want to be fairly flexible.
And it's just another quick example. Kyle, when you launched WebMapper, I saw the code. I think it was the Python setup.py py2 app. I mean, that code also. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that which I think you ran it? I quickly saw.
I think it's Python 3 webmapper.py.
Okay.
Yeah.
But my guess my point though is that that won't work, for instance, if I don't have Python installed, for instance.
Right.
Yeah.
And
also
that
won't work if you don't have libmapper installed.
Right.
With the
And
Python bindings for
Yeah.
libmapper.
those are the little connectivities that could be
Yep.
built out in a
Yeah, well, so the idea of a standalone, so this is the way that the max bindings, for example, work, is that the object, the thing that you're copying, sending to someone, and that they're executing, actually has a copy of libmapper included with it, and it refers to its local copy. And then that's one way of dealing with distribution, so we don't have to worry about whether things are installed on your system. Another way is that people distribute installers, where you double-click something and it copies all the files to the different places that they need to be. There's advantages and disadvantages to each.
Hey, since Homebrew's been brought up, what's the difference between, say, a package manager and an installer then, in your perspective? What's a package? Maybe sorry for the dumb questions, folks.
So the package manager is something that is it's okay. Package manager can deal with more than one piece of software, right? Whereas an installer is for a specific piece of software. You also use a package manager to update your installed software, right? So I run brew upgrade, and it upgrades all the things that I've installed through Homebrew to their most recent versions. Whereas an installer has all it is a script that says, take the dynamic library and put it in usr/local, put this somewhere else, and then it may have an uninstallation script too that can clean up after itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So a package manager is anyway, I'm a big fan. I think life is too complicated to not use a package manager, basically.
Yeah, got it.
I was going to say, Andrew, if I'm just going to launch a script here, but if you want to see this goodness, then you need a recent version of WebMapper, not the old.
Nice.
So that's a device that's changing its color using that API that I mentioned.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks.
No, it's not really intended for making a light show. It's just so that you could have a custom color for your device if you liked. All right. Go ahead.
Just one quick one, Joe. It goes back to the very beginning of this meeting. You mentioned how Cycling 74 seems to be a bit slow getting those objects operational. A question for everyone: would it be fruitful if users were writing to Cycling saying, "Hey, where is it? We know it's supposed to be coming," and diplomatically in a polite message. Would that help?
I've never found that to be useful.
I doubt it. Yeah, I don't know. I had success getting the Digital Orchestra Toolbox, and I've updated it a few times, and they responded. So I did submit the libmapper objects like a year and a bit ago, and obviously it's still not in the thing. I think there was some back and forth about I forget. Anyway, it's been a while. So maybe they weren't confident that it was installing on all the systems that they want to support. Yeah, it's a little opaque. Unfortunately, it's not like so like when we submit libmapper to Homebrew and update, then you can see on GitHub all the checks that it's running through and which ones it fails or passes, and it has to pass them all before it ends up being accepted. But with Cycling, you just email them a link, and then you maybe in a while hear back if someone had time to run it and whether they had any problems. Anyway, so that's really a task for me, I guess, to submit them again. But I'll cook up a new version first. I do think that, but I can also just put it in a release, right? Like it's not, you don't have to use the Max package manager. All you have to do is copy it into your packages folder.
That's what I've done this around you.
Yeah, I mean that's how I test them anyway. Just before we wrap up, I am curious. So we could say always happy if people give feedback, happy if they use the tools, happy if they're interested in changes in developing new bindings, new features. These are some of the projects that we have on the roadmap. If one of them interests you and you'd like to contribute, that's fantastic. Or if you have some other ideas. Matt already shared this idea that once he has some working hardware that we can send some out to people if they want to try the Eurorack module. I think we have some kind of items. I have some notes from this meeting about things we need to talk about, maybe specifically with the SAT, with Edu, the networking stuff. And Andrew will continue our discussion about recent version of the Max objects and WebMapper, and we can make sure we document any issues that you have so that we can fix them. Anyway, anyone else have any thoughts they'd like to share? Anything you want to discuss? I don't want to take all your time.
OSSIA score supported by libmapper. I know that was something that we talked about in the workshop a while ago, but
yeah, years ago now.
Still appreciate that. That might be another conversation for folks with the SAT.
Yeah.
Yep, that's on me, I guess. Should I answer on the fly or wait for the pool of questions? Okay, on the fly, so that's good. The short answer or the updated answer is, if you check on OSSIA, on libOSSIA's code, there is already a libmapper object there, but is not on production yet. So we are halfway there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's amazing, but that's been the case for some time now, years. So it's not it's as amazing as it is. It's not really moving forward as quickly as I would like to. The truth is, we pretty much don't have the workforce to work on that right now, and I'm hoping actually I could put this as part of a project, and then we can push as part of a project, and that would be a quick way to have this up and running. At this point, this might happen in the maybe end of the year, starting next year, but it's not a given at all.
Right.
I would like at this point to. OSSIA is part of. OSSIA Score specifically is part of this project and this idea of a SAT toolbox that includes Poara. So there is some effort in make the two tools talk together, and maybe that's an opportunity to add libmapper to it, since libmapper is already part of Poara modules.
Nice.
So to be seen. I cannot guarantee anything at this point. What I can guarantee that this is on my map, personal map, and I wish what I want is at maybe the end of this project that we are running, that we can support as many protocols as we can under the sun for doing this mapping networking thing. So definitely libmapper is on the radar. Not much more to say actually. Unfortunately, there's no news in that regard. Of other than our will to do it and our wish that we can put on the timeline anytime soon. Sorry,
Right.
It's not the answer you wanted, Casey, but
No.
I think it's like something that's really amazing about OSSIA is this the concept of time is really flexible in interesting ways. And I had done I think I presented this in the IDML and elsewhere, but some brainstorming about, so Andrew, this is another thing about session management, is this the idea of just mapping with time as one of the inputs, rather than thinking about sessions as a punctuated thing. I mean, it still can be anyway. So I actually have I have a slide pack with like some kind of conceptual exploration of this area, but it would be really interesting to look at the intersection of ASIA and mapping. Yeah, both from the punctuated session management kind of perspective and just mapping with time. Yeah, and that is something that you can already do with libmapper. You can map with time because timestamps are kind of first-class objects in the expression engine, so you can use them. Yeah, I'm not sure if you can set them currently because anyway, that's part of roadmap stuff. But you can use them as an input. All right, so we've been at this for an hour and 45 minutes. Anyone? and obviously we have multiple forums to continue the discussion. Gael, please.
Yes, just sorry because I missed a bit of the meeting, but what about the super collider objects? Where are they now?
The bindings for super collider?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they are. They were created by Matthias.
For Windows, I think.
I think they work for. They should be cross-platform. Let me see if I can find it. It's Mapper Eugen, right?
Mapper Eugen, yeah, that's correct. I think they are cross-platform, but they are very, very simple. It's like just very basic functionality at this point, and it was not touched after that. So
right,
unless someone gives a push.
Yeah, I mean, if someone indicates what more they would like, then that would be a good thing to push, because otherwise it's just.
But are they supposed to be equivalent to the max objects, or?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's a very different kind of programming paradigm to the way Max works. Just trying to look. There is.
They don't have nearly the same functionality. It's more a proof of concept than a production tool at this point. I mean, they can generate a device, they can generate signals, and they can exchange those signals. But everything there is very limited. I mean, you can always access the source code and augment because it's really C++ under the hood. So it should be the same as creating a libmapper object on C++. However, the way it's made is very convoluted. I mean, it's not because of Matthias, but because Super Collider and the way it works. In the end, we actually have this bridge outside, and we have to talk. So there is some back and forth to talk. So it's not really a native object of in Super Collider. It's actually a bridge that creates a device in an instance in C++ and then does the talking. So it's because
when Matthias did demos of MapLooper, all the synths were Super Collider using Mapper Eugen, right? I know they were fairly simple synthesizers, but it was functional.
No, it's all functional. It's just there's not all the functionality of libmapper there. It's really you can expose the signals. So if you want to control stuff on Super Collider, that's definitely useful and that's usable right now. Yeah, I remembering now. I think the thing is that because of Super Collider's architecture, server client stuff, we cannot run, of course, libmapper on the server. So what happens is you have to create an instance of libmapper, so you have to create a device elsewhere, and you have to communicate through the server via OSC messages. So there's internal communication and another instance that runs in separate. So that's how more or less how it was engineered. It's not a problem per se, but it has some specificities that if someone wants to touch that code and improve it or make it more add more functionality to it, it needs to take into account some particularities of Super Collider architecture. Pretty much client server way to do it. And the problem that you have to talk to both. So the Matthias approach was you create a UGEM, so it actually works. It lives on the server, so it grabs the signal and passes it straight to the server. But then that leaves out all the math and stuff that's on the client. So you have to play with it a little bit to make
Interesting.
it work.
Yeah,
It's more
Mark Zadell wrote Super Collider bindings as well back in like 2013 or 2012 or something. But it involved, you had to recompile Super Collider entirely. So it was, I guess there's pros and cons. Does that answer your question, Gael? Sounds like a nice project for someone to work on.
Yes. Yeah, for me, it sort of closes the subject. So, because
right.
I tend to do like everything inside Super Collider anyway, but
okay.
Yeah, because I was just curious to try it because there was not I don't remember the files where Windows were not there at the time, and I cannot see it anymore in the downloads on the website. So.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I could check into that, but it's if you go to the libmapper organization on GitHub, then we try to keep all the projects, at least a fork of all the projects there. So it is sitting there, but it hasn't. Last update was 2 years ago, at least in main branch. Andrew, do you have a comment or question?
Sorry, yeah, thank you. Just again, I would love if anyone could spare a few minutes. I'm actually following the instructions as we speak, and there's also simple things like so the first I'm trying to run WebMapper from source, just as an example, right? And number one says like to build and install libmapper, and you run command line pip3 install libmapper, which I just did, and my terminal window is telling me it's installed, but of course I don't exactly know what's happened. Like installed what, where is it, what do I do next, that kind of stuff. And I'm sure this is all like very simple things for you folks, and it'd be just wonderful if there's anyone could spare a minute, or if you think it's best just to write it out, I can do that and submit it in the Git.
Yeah, probably better to write it out. So
okay.
pip is another package manager.
Sure. Yeah.
And but it's specifically for Python.
Python, yeah.
Right? For Python modules. So by running pip install libmapper, it downloaded the libmapper bindings from PyPy and put them in the search path for Python. In the same way that if you use the Max package manager, it would download and put it in the right folder, right? Yeah. So now it means once it's installed, if you're running Python and you type import libmapper, then it will not give you an error, which is what would happen if you didn't have libmapper installed.
Right. Okay, I'll keep going. Yeah, thanks. Keep going. See what happens next. And I'm like the next set of instructions, for example, is mapper session. So again, I cd to that directory and run the code, and that'll install that, and then just keep going, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, this is people saying like terminal commands out loud is not the it's not the mode of communication that's most efficient. We should be using text when it's text.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Thanks.
Anyway, so let's wrap it up. We're almost at 2 hours. Thanks so much for everyone who attended. Big thanks to Kyle and Matt for presenting all your projects. And we'll see you all on GitHub issues, I guess. We can meet there for problems and bug fixes and reports and stuff like this. But Andrew, don't worry, we can get you up and running with the new versions of things. It's it won't be difficult.
I should say I love coding. I love scripting. I love programming. It's just I didn't do my degrees in that, but I love to learn this stuff. It's like, oh, but you know, so I'm not. I have a lot of respect for you folks, especially those that really know all these different languages. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, but even so, I think smart people who value their time certainly use package managers and use, you know, modules and libraries and stuff that have been developed by other people, right? So it's not about doing everything from scratch yourself. Do work on it. Yes, program, but do the parts that are interesting for you, and let's try and make everything else easy.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Okay, take care, everybody. I can flip to my last slide, which says thanks on the slide deck. And yeah, see you all soon. Take care.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.